Maya Reyes believed she could read anyone in 10 seconds flat, and the tired man with the worn coat standing behind her in line looked like nothing more than another overwhelmed single father barely keeping his head above water in a city built to grind people down. But she was wrong, badly wrong. And by the time she understood that the quiet stranger she'd brushed past without a second glance was the only person who could keep her from total professional ruin, the damage from her snap judgment was already done, because sometimes it's the people we overlook who notice everything, and this is that story. The coffee shop on Randolph Street smelled of burnt espresso and damp wool, the sort of cramped, overpriced spot found in every downtown Chicago block, filled with people who wished they were somewhere else, and Maya stood third in line scrolling through her inbox, already 3 meetings ahead of herself, when she nearly stepped on the backpack belonging to a small girl with dark curls and serious brown eyes who apologized instantly while yanking it closer. The man crouched beside her, mid-30s, jacket faded from wear, had steady hands as he zipped his daughter's bag shut, though a weariness sat behind his eyes that went deeper than lost sleep, and Maya muttered an indifferent, "No problem," paid without checking her total, and was gone in under 3 minutes, rushing toward a 9:30 meeting with the acquisitions team, and by the time she reached her office building, the man and his daughter had entirely slipped from her mind. That had been an ordinary Tuesday in a life that ran on speed and precision, because at 28 Maya had already made junior partner at Ashford Consulting Group, one of the city's most aggressive firms, complete with the corner office, the enviable client roster, and a reputation that opened doors before she knocked, along with a boss named Victor Reed who was breathing down her neck about the Colton account, insisting that a 6-week wait on financials from Colton Manufacturing was unacceptable for a $40 million acquisition deal, and reminding her that if it collapsed, the blame would land squarely on her. Colton Manufacturing was pursuing a standard consolidation of 2 smaller rivals. The paperwork looked clean, the leadership seemed capable, yet something about it nagged at Maya in a way she couldn't name, an unease that instinct alone couldn't justify in a boardroom where only hard evidence mattered. And then an anonymous text arrived: "Check Colton's Delaware subsidiary, it's not what it looks like." She dismissed it as a rival scare tactic, but the discomfort lingered. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Shaw sat in a quieter cafe with 40 minutes before he needed to collect his daughter Nora from school, his laptop open to dense financial records. He read the way others read novels, having spent weeks quietly tracking the Colton deal and its CEO, Gordon Blake, a polished, well-regarded executive, secretly running a fraud built on shell companies and offshore transfers so elaborate it would take real money and expertise to hide, expertise Daniel recognized because he'd spent a decade dismantling schemes just like it, and he understood that Maya Reyes had no idea she was being positioned as the fall guy in tailored business attire while Blake used her firm's reputation as cover. Daniel could have walked away since this wasn't his fight, but something about Maya's brisk certainty reminded him of a version of himself he used to be before everything in his own life fell apart, so he sent the anonymous warning about the Delaware subsidiary and went to pick up his daughter. Over the following 2 days, Maya discovered the subsidiary was indeed a shell designed to obscure rather than clarify, riddled with Cayman transfers, invoices for services never rendered, and a board member hiding a criminal history under a changed name, and a second anonymous message pointed her toward that board member, Walter Finch, calling him the Keystone, which only sharpened her anger rather than her fear, prompting her to demand the sender's identity and receiving only "someone who knows what you're walking into, keep digging." That same evening, Nora complained in the car about not wanting to attend a friend's party because another girl had mocked her backpack for being old, and Daniel, stuck at a red light in the rain, gently told her that people who go out of their way to be cruel are usually struggling with something else. And when Nora quietly asked if her late mother would have known what to say, he answered that she would have, the grief still raw beneath his calm. 3 days later Maya confirmed that Walter Finch was a professional fixer who'd surfaced in at least 4 major fraud cases over the past decade, always slipping away before consequences caught up, and she brought her findings straight to Victor, urging him to kill the Colton deal, but he dismissed her evidence as circumstantial, reminded her that as junior partner she advised while he decided, and ordered her to stand down or risk her career, leaving her stunned and furious. That night, unable to let it go, she exchanged messages with her anonymous contact, admitting Victor was wrong and she couldn't prove it alone, and receiving the reply, "I'm not letting you go down for someone else's crime," which led her to propose meeting the next day at noon in Lincoln Park. Daniel arrived early, watched her cross the park with the same sharp, guarded posture she'd worn in the cafe, and when she recognized him as the guy with the daughter, he confirmed his name, Daniel Shaw, and admitted he used to work in corporate strategy and had seen this exact scheme before, prompting her to ask if he considered himself some kind of vigilante consultant, to which he replied only, "Something like that," insisting he was helping because she didn't deserve to be anyone's scapegoat. He laid out the full picture, the shell company, the offshore accounts, Finch's history, and how Blake had structured the deal so that Maya, not Victor, would carry the legal exposure, and explained that proving it required irrefutable evidence from Colton's private server, evidence that technically required unauthorized access, which Maya balked at until Daniel pointed out that doing nothing guaranteed she'd lose everything anyway, so she agreed to help. They worked from his modest apartment, walls covered in his daughter's drawings, and within 20 minutes he'd breached the server, uncovering a folder full of emails between Blake and Finch detailing the shell structure and their plan to use Ashford as a liability shield, evidence Maya realized would be catastrophic once made public. Daniel copied the files to an encrypted drive, wiped their access trail, and advised her to bring it to someone outside the firm's influence, the SEC or a journalist, while admitting, when she asked why he was risking so much to help her, that years earlier he hadn't spoken up when it mattered and people he loved had paid for his silence, a rawness in his voice that made Maya realize she'd misjudged far more than his appearance, and as she left, she told him his daughter was lucky to have him, to which he replied he was the lucky one. Back home, Maya reached an old law school friend turned investigative journalist, Ethan Cole, who agreed to review the files after some convincing, and they met the next morning at a near-empty diner where he confirmed the story was significant enough for the front page but needed days to verify, a timeline that put Maya in a bind since the deal was set to close in 2 days. Before she could resolve that, Victor summoned her to a meeting with senior partners Carol Vance, Todd Whitfield, and Bruce Halloway, presenting her internal search history as evidence she disobeyed his direct order, and despite her insistence that the fraud was real, the partners dismissed her findings as speculation and pulled her off the deal entirely, reassigning her to a lesser account, a decision that left her shaking with anger but unable to reveal the drive before Ethan's story ran. That same day, Daniel got a call from Nora's school after she pushed a classmate who'd cruelly said her mother probably left because she was ugly, and though the principal insisted on shared detention despite the provocation, Daniel told his daughter privately that he understood her anger completely, encouraging her to walk away next time not because the other girl deserved kindness but because cruelty usually comes from someone else's pain, a lesson that ended in a hug, a quiet admission that she missed her mother, and a promise of ice cream. That evening Maya and Daniel met again over coffee, comparing notes on their respective disasters, and when she asked why he'd really left the corporate world, he confided that his wife had died of cancer 3 years earlier while he was buried in deals and travel, and that after her death he sold his stake in his old firm and rebuilt his life around his daughter. A story that cracked something open in Maya's carefully guarded composure. The story broke the next morning, naming Colton's fraud and mentioning Ashford's failed due diligence, sending Colton's stock tumbling and prompting Blake to issue a hollow denial, while Victor confronted Maya about leaking the files, calling it insubordination and suspending her for 2 weeks unpaid despite Carol's warning that firing her outright would look like retaliation. Hours later, an SEC attorney named Patricia Owen summoned Maya downtown, informing her that Ashford's role was under scrutiny and pressing her to reveal how she'd obtained the files, a line Maya refused to cross even under threat of an obstructed investigation, protecting Daniel's identity while agreeing to cooperate fully otherwise. That pressure escalated further when Maya received an anonymous threat warning her to back off, which Daniel insisted she immediately forward to the authorities while declaring that she would no longer go anywhere alone until the danger passed. Days later Victor called to say legal had cleared Ashford of major liability since the files came from Colton's own server, offering Maya her job back on the condition that she framed the firm's conduct favorably in her testimony, a compromise she reluctantly accepted out of practical necessity even as Daniel challenged her to consider building an independent practice instead of returning to a place that never valued her. Before she could decide, a new anonymous tip claimed Blake intended to force the signing through in secret. The next day, and against every rational objection, Maya resolved to witness it herself, with Daniel refusing to let her go alone. They staked out a private executive suite near the waterfront at dawn, watched Blake arrive with Finch and an unnamed associate, snuck in through a service window, and overheard Blake dismissing the investigation as a temporary nuisance he could outlast through bribed board votes, revealing that Carol and Bruce were secretly on his payroll, and openly discussing dealing with Maya if she became a problem, a threat that sent them fleeing through the alley moments before being caught. Recording captured and immediately forwarded to FBI agent Ray Dalton, who used it to secure warrants and arrest Blake, Finch, and the two compromised board members within the hour. In the aftermath, Victor admitted for the first time that he'd been wrong to dismiss her warnings and offered her a full partnership, which Maya ultimately declined, choosing instead to accept a genuine equity partnership at a small forensic accounting firm called Fairline Partners, run by a direct, principled founder named Grace Bennett, who valued exactly the kind of integrity that had gotten Maya suspended in the first place. Over the following months, Maya testified before a grand jury and later at trial, secured convictions on every count against Blake and his conspirators, built her new practice into something she was proud of, and grew steadily closer to Daniel and Nora. Eventually moving in together, telling him she loved him, and reflecting that the quiet, dismissed man from that first coffee shop encounter had taught her the truth she'd spent her whole career missing, that worth isn't proven through swift judgments or unbroken certainty, but through the willingness to look again, admit when you're wrong, and recognize that the people most easily overlooked are often the ones who see the most clearly. A lesson that reshaped not only her career but the entire shape of the life she built afterward with the family she never expected to find.